Hi Peter, thank you for purchasing the online lesson and thank you for the footage. Just like to go through some key areas of concern and help you prioritise what you should be working on in the coming weeks. Like the way you stand into it from face on, from down the line, we could do with just creating a little bit more angle, a little bit more sort of tilt in the pelvis. Maybe look at giving yourself a little bit more room, so a little bit cramped setup. Main thing is to feel like the pelvis is going to hinge a little bit more, which in turn would lower the handle a little bit and just get you over the ball a little bit more from down the line. Very little from face on. One thing you want to at least consider looking at the setup here, surmising you're using something like a 7 or an 8 iron, which is the norm when people send me footage across. I don't think there's any mention of it in your email, but anyway, you'd be looking at positioning the golf ball maybe 3 balls back of 0 point. You can see there that you're substantially back of the centre of your arc, which is your lead shoulder. Consequently, in theory, that should make you hit down a little bit more on the golf ball. However, what sometimes happens, and this is what we're going to look at when we look at your swinging motion, players start to react to that back ball position and start to do some things to satisfy the trajectory that they have in their mind for that golf club. So just bear that in mind. Set up a little bit more hinge in the pelvis, courtesy of lowering the handle and moving away from the golf ball a little bit, and then just consider manoeuvring the ball forward so that it's not quite as far back, maybe 3.5 balls back of 0 point, which is in line with the lead shoulder. Do not use the inside of the heel as a reference point, because it's just not a very good reference point for most golfers in most scenarios. So, swing itself. First thing, we'll look at it from down the line. Something that we definitely need to look at is we just see the tailbone move away from the red line a little bit. And as we come through, the hands get projected away from you excessively. So the path will become too much to the right, or the swing's direction, should I say, will become a little bit too much to the right, and the shaft will start to exit a little bit high. So when we start looking at the things from face on, the changes that we make should also help with that look and that tendency in regards to the swing's direction. So moving on to the face on view, which is where the primary focus needs to be. What I've done is I've put some lines on there that are very relevant to you at this moment in time, and I'm just going to work through each one with you now. So we've already discussed the ball position. I like the way you push your pelvis forward. However, I would like to see you push it forward a little bit less. So the centre of your pelvis at the moment is very close to being in line with that lead heel. Now, it should ideally be just ahead of the centre of your stance. And what that would allow you to do is create a little bit less side bend at P1. So having some side bend is fine, but we don't want excessive side bend. Excessive side bend, again, helps shift this swing direction out to the right too much, which makes controlling the hand path a little bit difficult. What it also does is gets a little bit too much differential between the trail and lead shoulder at P1. And again, for someone who struggles with thinning the golf ball or a high overtaking rate, we don't want too much of that. So ball not quite as far back, pelvis not quite as far forward. So think in terms of having the centre of the pelvis or the belt buckle in line, or just maybe 1 inch to 2 inches ahead of the centre of the stance, and use the heels as the reference for the centre of the stance. During the backswing, the takeaway when viewed from down the line, just go back to this view, can appear a little bit on the inside. So the hands come in and the club comes in at a slightly higher rate. One of the reasons for that is that there's very little independent hinging of the wrist. Now, I don't mind that. The issue you may have, and it's difficult to see on this because the shaft from down the line gets a little bit blurred, or the club head does. If we are going to work from P1 to P2 with very little wrist hinge, then what we don't want is too much rolling of the golf club. Again, that's going to add to that right shifted, shallow, struggling for the good quality strike, stroke divot that you're looking for when you're moving at speed. So a little bit too much on the inside, courtesy of a little bit too much roll of the club. So that rolling aspect needs to be controlled. And a good way to feel that is to keep the back of, although you've not got a glove on here, but you get what I mean, keep the back of the gloved hand pointing at the target for a little bit longer, from P1 to maybe 1.5, and then at P2 feel like the back of the gloved hand is pointing down a little bit more as opposed to pointing towards the camera, as we see here from face on. So just calming that rolling aspect down. As we continue into the swing, as we arrive at the top, you're doing a lot of things nicely here, but the thing that really stands out is the lack of extension. So we have a situation where if we took a line out, the blue line here through the ear, and one coming out the chest, the orange arrow, ideally, I would like to see, and these are two nice feels for you, the ear more to the ground and the chest more to the sky. Now, if you need some images to help you see the effects of this before you start working on it, just let me know, drop me a quick email, and I'll make sure that you get those across. As you start to extend more, particularly in the upper part of the spine, the lead arm is going to travel further. So it's going to get propelled by what your body is doing. And that's what I see. When I look at your backswing, I see quite a lot of extension and sufficient extension in the pelvis, sufficient extension in the trail leg. I don't see sufficient extension in the upper spine and the neck area. So feeling like the chest is more to the sky and the ear is more to the ground at P4 will allow you to propel the butt of the club and the lead arm further in the backswing, which is good for power. It will also allow you to move more efficiently in the downswing. So what you're going to do now is, as we move into the downswing, you won't need to do what you see yourself doing as much. So we looked before from down the line and we said that the hand path gets moved excessively out to the right, and we related that to the type of shot pattern that you've got. In the downswing, because you haven't travelled the lead arm far enough, you've not really stored up enough potential energy. So what you're going to do now is you're going to start to shift the lower body very quickly. So the rate at which you do this, moving the lower body forward is a pivotal part of our system, but the rate at which you do it is very important. You do it too much too soon, which is why if we look at the head, it starts tipping back within the green lines. And as the head tips back, the lead shoulder, which is the centre of the arc, works back and up too quick. As that works back and up too quick, the centre of the arc is further away from the golf ball. So now we have to straighten out the wrist angles too quick. So that's why we see quite a high overtaking rate and a little bit of extension in this lead wrist at 7.5. So the pelvis is driving forward too fast. The arms are staying too passive, but then the wrists are forced to come out during the hit of the golf ball. Now, it's not as untidy as some that I've seen, but it does need tidying up. It is relevant to the type of golf shot that you're hitting. So how do we do this? Get rid of all the lines. We want the hands to be projected less out to the right. We want the upper body and lower body to be sequenced in a much more appropriate manner on the way through. And we want to add some length to the backswing via extending the spine and learning to extend in all segments, not just the lower body. You've got the pelvis, you've got the spine, the main part of the spine, and then you've got the neck area as well. So your key thoughts, just to prioritise here now, would be at P1, I want to see a ball that's slightly further forward and the pelvis slightly less forward. At P4, I want to see the ear pointing more to the ground and the chest pointing more to the sky. So there will be two really good feels or images to use early on in the piece. On the way through, I want you to focus primarily on your follow through. When we arrive at P9, right arm parallel with the ground in the downswing, I want you to feel like both arms are bolt straight. The lead wrist is perfectly flat and the club points straight down the range. So just go through that again. At P9, when the right arm's parallel with the ground, I want both arms to be perfectly straight, bolt straight, the lead wrist to be perfectly flat, and the club, as a result, would be pointing straight down the range. Now, initially, you might want to do that slowly just to get familiar with it. Ultimately, going forward, I'd like you to concentrate on doing that at speed. So we often talk online about hitting hard and stopping quick. Now, as you do that, and in order for you to do that effectively, your body has to work a certain way. Rather than figuring out how to get the body and all its segments to do all the things they need to do at the correct rate and at the correct time in the golf swing, it's much better to focus on that destination. So if all those sequences are carried out correctly, you will be able to achieve what I've just asked you to achieve. Initially, you may find that a little bit of a challenge. Keep working at it. Keep adding more of that feel, more of that sensation on the way through. The other thing that I'd like you to spend a little bit of time on, just to tidy up this bottom segment of the swing here, and just to slow down that overtaking, is to just spend some time hitting some partial shots where you try and return the shaft at impact to the same angle it was at address. And what that would mean is that the rate at which the club passes the hands would be delayed a little bit. Now, when you do that, just make some little swings. You're just trying to highlight and isolate that particular segment of the swing. Don't worry about doing that at speed. That can be done in quite a passive manner. So if you've got any questions in regards to anything that's just been discussed during this session, feel free to drop me a line. If you want to send me a little bit of footage of you practicing those pieces before you start really getting into it, again, feel free to do so. You've got my email address. Just send me a little bit of footage. Okay, Darren, I'm doing the drills. Am I doing it correctly? And then from there, we can really get things progressing. Thanks very much, and good luck with the changes.